All right, brought the tea over here yesterday. Right ahead of a snow squall, so that worked out pretty good. But we have to, it needs the brakes done on it because they're getting kind of anemic. And we gotta pull the hydraulic unit apart, just the top cover, the easy split. This got to come off, and I got to figure out why my levers got out of time. They both still work, but the outside one for some reason slipped forward, and I don't know why. So we got to figure out why it did that. And while I got it apart, I got the stuff to I got a gasket, a seal, and a friction disc to go through the 3-point quadrant. I have the parts to rebuild this leveling gearbox real quick. And I believe, I didn't double check the part numbers, I probably should have, but I believe I have the seals to replace the rock shaft seals, because this one's a leaker. It ain't bad, but it weeps. So we'll probably do the rock shaft seals while we're at it, because I'll have to have that fender off anyhow, and when that fender's off, the rock shaft will come off. So match that one, we can just take loose and kind of push it forward far enough and pull that rock shaft real quick. But anyhow, actually don't gotta pull the rock shaft, just gotta pull the arms. But anyhow, that's what we got to do. But before we can get it up in the shop, the exhaust pipe has to come off. So it'll go through the door. And I got the cherry picker down to help me out, because Mom and Dad are out of town this weekend visiting my sister, so that's why I decided to do this weekend. So that Dad wouldn't interfere with anything Dad's got going on in the shop. So it really shouldn't be too terrible of a project. The hydraulics will be the worst part of it, and obviously it needs an oil change and stuff. It's a little chilly today. I almost thought about trying to do some chisel plowing instead, but I was like, you know what, this project needs done. Might as well just get it out of the way. This is a good time to do it. But I've been working on fertilizer Rex too, which actually everything is in really damn good shape. We can talk about that more later, but I do have one field that needs some lime spread on it that we should be able to do this week. Works out nice when you have a lime spreader of your own, so if you want to go spread lime, as long as you got a pile, you can just go spread lime. Works out pretty good. We gotta go through my bag of parts here. Most of this stuff is for the PTO on the 1600, but that's my friction disc. Those are my brake springs. That's for the PTO. There's my gasket. That is my shaft seal. There's my gasket. Okay. So everything else that's in here should be for the 1600. And then I already had a top cover gasket on the shelf that I got in a, I can't remember where I got that from, but I ended up with a bunch of gaskets. So I already got a top cover gasket, so it should be brake discs and brake springs, and that's all for hydraulics. So we're gonna start on the brakes first because that's the easy thing, and I got started late today because I had stuff to do this morning. But the brakes should be a fairly quick and simple job. Should be. All right, I'm hoping to do this without having to drop the batteries, which I don't think is gonna be that big of a deal. But the first thing I'm gonna do is pop the steps off. Otherwise, you can get yourself in the back of the head pretty good if you're not paying attention. So this is more of a not hurt yourself thing than a necessary to do the job thing. Also, I really need to, I think on later tractors they actually got them. I think either they got them or it was a field update or something, but putting a second set of holes on these flanges for the steps, because with the single bolts they like to twist, and it can break the steps like that one. I think already might be. I think that spot weld's actually, yeah, that spot weld actually let go. So if you can, it's actually not a bad idea. You just bolt it back up and take a transfer punch and transfer a couple holes in, and you can drill them and tap them by hand. It ain't no big deal. It's just cast. It don't drill that hard. But with that out of the way, now need a ratchet to socket, and we can take that cover off. Dad had a pipe welding project going on, so the shop is a little cramped because all the tools are still in here. Where can I set you? There's not really. If I set you there, will that kind of work? I think that'll kind of work. I have never had these brakes apart, so at least that I can recall. The longer ratchet. That's better. And the T has triple disc brakes. I can't remember if the triple discs started on the 1950 or if they started on the 1850. I think they started on the 1950, and then everything up had triples. So obviously the 1950 T when it apparently I got some pinion seals leaking. Well, that's interesting. They must not be leaking that bad if that's all that was in there. If that's the case, we're probably not going to worry about it right now because those are a little bit more of an involved project. Than what we got time for. Well, yeah, they are leaking just a wee bit. And that's just a spacer. Come on. And then to get that out, we got to undo the draw bolt on the brake actuator. Well, you're supposed to come out of there, you little bugger. There we go. And now we should be able to fish this out of here. Or we have to scrape some stuff off before we can fish it out of there. That works too, because it's a little stuck. Okay, I got all the guts out. I remember that being a pain on the 4150 too, because the 4150 apparently, even though it's a 74, somebody decided to make the executive decision that it was a good idea to put manual brakes on that instead of the hydraulic brakes like what was on the rest of the 55 series, but I digress. So the strange part is, you would expect, since that thing had some oil laying in it, that the shaft and pinion seal would be all wet and they're dry. So I got no idea in the end, because that's a freeze plug or a Welch plug in the end of the shaft, and that's dry, so it wasn't coming from there. So I don't know if it was just an accumulation of grease and water, because there's water in there, obviously. The other strange part is the splines are, but that's obviously not the seal. That must just be some sort of dust cover, and then there must be a seal behind it. I'll have to look in the parts book and see exactly how everything lays. Because obviously the seal can't seal on shaft splines. But it's just weird that there's nothing around the shaft that's actually wet. It's all just down here. So I'm wondering if it was just a mixture of old grease and water, not actually gear lube. I'm not saying it doesn't leak a little bit, but anyhow, let me clean up parts real quick, and I'm probably going to wish I'd have got a bunch of cans of brake clean, but I might be able to use some lacquer thinner and some paper towel and just get all that cleaned out of there. So let me do some cleaning, and then we'll be right back. Alright, I got the brake housing cleaned up pretty darn good, all things considered. And we gotta finish getting the actuator apart, the spacer ring. Obviously the double disc brakes don't use that spacer ring. That's so that they could add that third brake disc in. And this is obviously the outside cover, which we're gonna hit the sanding pad and take some of the rust off of it. This has got a little bit of a lip on the inside and outside. We're gonna buff off of it. Same thing on here. There's a little bit of a lip worn just from use, so we're gonna take that off of it. But first we got to get the springs out of it so that we can split it. Getting the springs off is the easy part. Getting them back on is the hard part. good. I'm glad I got some new ones, because like that guy right there, is the hooks are sprung. So, I mean, sometimes, most of the time, you could probably technically reuse those. It's just, if you're doing it, you might as well just get new ones. However, very rarely, I don't think I've ever actually replaced any of the climber balls yet. Usually they clean up good enough to reuse. And these, I don't even think you're going to need. I've cleaned, like the ones in the, I remember if it's the 1600 or the 1800 were really rusty, so I spent quite a bit of time with a Scotch-Brite pad cleaning them up. These aren't even really rusty, they're just kind of dull. But heck, Oliver used these, Case used brakes really similar to this. I bet, I've never had any apart, but I bet the IH disc brakes were probably pretty similar to this. So, this part applies to a lot of different brands. So let me finish cleaning these guys up, now that I got them apart. Okay, so the first thing we gotta do is clean the ramps out, which it appears at some point somebody has had this apart and put some sort of grease or something in here, because there's some shit, which is a big no-no. You're not, never ever lubricate these ball ramps, because all it does is attract dirt, and then your brakes will work hard, they'll stick, they won't work right. Put everything together in here dry. As much as you want, as much as you think you want to put some grease or something in here to help those, don't do it. Just leave them dry. Like old Buford T. Justice would say, you can think about it, but don't do it. Once you get them cleaned out, it's generally a good idea to just set them together. And just make sure that there's no catch or anything, which that works really nice and smooth, so should be good. And that's how these work. When you pull on those, it draws these apart like that, and the balls climb the ramps, and it pushes everything out against the brake discs and locks everything up. So now we're just going to take a sanding pad and touch these guys up a little bit, get rid of that groove. Just working the edge, because obviously you don't want to. It'd be nice if there was a way to chuck these things up in the lathe, and there probably would be. But ours won't swing it because of this ear on here. Our lathe isn't big enough. But to get in here and take this, and then you can go back in and put a non-directional finish on it, and they'd probably bite really good. But okay, now that everything's cleaned up, put this back together. And these dang springs. I hate these springs. There's no good way to do it. Actually, I wonder where. I'm sure there's probably actually a tool for this. I would assume. But that don't work too bad, actually. But even if there was a tool for it, it's not like I do it enough to justify buying the tool, because I'm sure the tool ain't cheap. If it is cheap, it'd probably be worth it, but alright, there's that. Hopefully I can sneak it back in. I had to take this off to get it out because everything was so dirty. Hopefully I can sneak it. You should be able to sneak it back in together, because putting this pin inside there kind of sucks. But we'll find out. The 3 disc brakes are a little goofy because the drum's so deep. On the double disc brakes, it's not that big of a deal. Alright, let's see how agreeable she wants to be. Well, I can tell you right off the bat, those ain't the right discs. Come on, man. I even gave them the part number when I ordered them. Son of a bitch. Alright, so I got the brakes that came out of it cleaned up. They're actually, I'm thinking, I highly doubt they're original. I mean, they could be, but I doubt it. But I think they have been replaced. If they are original, they're in really good shape. Otherwise, they've been replaced at some point, and they're still, I mean, they're still damn near full thickness. They got plenty of life in the wear. I mean, they cleaned up nice. I don't think it's going to hurt us any to just throw these back in. But these are what came out of it. These are what they sent me. Yep. And that's the center hole difference. So these are going to be your disc brakes for like a Super Series 3-digit. I don't know, it seems like the 1550, 1600, 1650, 1655. I think those use smaller brake discs than the large frame tractors, but don't quote me on that because it's been a minute since I worked on the 1600. But anyway, I mean, it ain't like we don't have tractors that won't use these, so I guess now I got 6 of them laying on the shelf for spares, because there ain't no sense in sending them back now, because it's been, I can't remember how long since I ordered them. It just kind of sucks that, I mean, obviously these things got plenty of life in them, but it's one of them deals where you're in there, you might as well just replace them, make them new, that way you know they're new. But I guess for the sake of getting the tractor back together and operable and moving on to the next project, we're just going to throw these back in there. And luckily the material that they make these liners out of isn't really conducive to oil impregnation, so they don't really, it's not like they're oil soaked. You clean them up and they pretty much just clean up, which is nice. So now get you back up here where you can see ish. Now let's see how nice she wants to be. And you want to make sure those things slide all the way back in there without catching on anything. Oops. hopefully this thing will slide in here without any trouble. Oh yeah, here we go. It's a lot easier when everything's... Come on. Go the rest of the way, dang you. There we go. Because once you got it in, there's basically no room to get that pin in from the back. So, but what does make it easier is you undo your pull rod, and then you could take your brake actuation arm and swing it up out of the way, and it makes this hole bigger. So it makes it easier to get the bolt or the clevis in and out. But before we stack anything else in there, let me get a new cotter pin in that. Okay, cotter pin's on. Brake disc. And spacer plate. And brake disc. And now, let me grab, hold on, bear with me. This long enough? I think it is. Yes. Okay, so this is something that's more important to do with brand new brake discs than it is with the ones that came out of it, but this is just to give everybody a heads up. So because we've ran into this problem before, there's actually, and I've only actually ever taken one tractor apart that actually had the shims. Don't know why there weren't more, but this didn't have shims. I don't think the 1800 had shims. I don't remember the 1600 having shims, but there is shim stacks available for this brake cover to set brake clearance if you need them. But we were working on a Super 55 for a friend one time. We put the brakes together, and the brakes were locked up basically as soon as you put the all the discs in and put the cover on and tightened everything up. And after doing measuring, found out that the brake stack was actually deeper or taller than the brake housing was deep. So you put the cover on and you automatically just compressed all the brake stack and you couldn't move the tractor. We needed to get that tractor out of the shop, so what we ended up doing was actually surfacing all the brake plates and making them fit in the housing. But I've never had to call to see if you can still get them, if they're available, if they're not available, if you got to find them on a parts tractor. But there are shims available if for some reason you need to space out the brake cover to get you the clearance for the brakes to work right. So you just take yourself a straight edge and you lay it on the edge of the brake housing. Obviously you want to make sure you're clear of the end of the shaft, and you just want to make sure that you have clearance for the brake plates, because the brake cover is flat. It doesn't have a protrusion where the brakes run. It's just a flat cover. So as long as you can lay a straight edge over the mounting surface and have clearance, your brakes are going to work okay. So there's your tidbit of information for the day. So I got to go get some new lock washers so we can put that brake cover on, and we'll finish this up side up real quick. Don't need this big honking ratchet anymore, but It's what's laying here. Okay, there's that. So now we can bring you around the front here. Except there's still no good spot to stick you. And that can go back through there. And where is that guy? That's like a crowned little spacer that matches the recess in the bottom of the actuator arm there. And just because it's easier to run it up. And where is my pin? Alright, put a cotter pin in back in that, and we will adjust the brakes after I get that other side done. So I'll just go ahead and get that out of the way, because it's a rinse and repeat of this side. Okay, so two things, just because I was looking and noticed it. Actually, first off, the one thing, I wasn't looking and noticed it, but this side, the brake housing is dry. It's just full of a lot of dirt and brake dust, so that's good. And then the second thing, I think I've actually mentioned this before, working on this at other times, but we'll just mention it again. If you'll notice, you'll see all this torch scarring here on this axle housing. That is a pretty much telltale sign that this brake pinion has been out of the tractor before. If we go around to the other side, and this is just something you can look for if you're ever looking at a tractor. If you look at this side, you'll see there is no torch scarring here, so this pinion's never been off. And if they did, they took the time to pull the whole axle housing. But it says right in the manual for these, because we had to do it on the 1800 when we redid the brake pinion bearings and stuff on it. Although we did it cleaner, we didn't use a torch. We ground it and made it look nice and blended it in, so you can't tell if unless you were actually like looking at it. But it'll tell you right in the manual if you have to pull the brake pinions on these without pulling the axle housings. You have to clip this corner to get enough clearance, and then that brake pinion housing will walk out of there. And I know Oliver's not the only one that did this, because I was working on my boss has a Case 530 Construction King backhoe. Like, it's just a Case 530 It's like a first generation Case backhoe. And I had to work on the brakes on it, and even on that, didn't have a manual for it, but I was talking to a guy that worked at a Case dealer, and he said even on those things, if you had to work on the brakes, there was a service bulletin that said, for model so-and-so, in order to get the brakes apart, you have to notch the frame right here. So that wasn't just an Oliver thing. There was a lot of companies that did that if you had to work on your brake pinions and stuff. Some of them, or there was quite a few companies that had made it, or had a procedure where you had to clip your axle, or you had to clip something somewhere to get the brake housings out without having to pull the entire axle assembly, because otherwise that's what you'd have to do. So just something to, if you're ever looking at a tractor and you just kind of want to get an idea of what it might have been through in its past life, and you look at something, or you see around the axle housing somewhere like that, where they've been doing some some slight modification, chances are somebody's been into the rear end at some point. Although it is odd on this that it was on this side and not that side. Or, you know, normally you do something to the brake pinions. Normally you do both, you know, normally you would do both sides, but apparently on this they just had to do the one side. So there's another thing for you for today. All right, I got both brakes are back together. The other side went better because it wasn't all wet. However, got this side apart, and there was a small little rim of 80/90 around the pinion seal, even though this side was dry. That's what I was expecting to see on this side, because this side the whole housing was wet but the seal was dry. This side the whole housing was dry but the seal was wet. If mechanical things made sense, there wouldn't be any job for mechanics. So anyhow, with that all out of the way, it's too late to tear into the hydraulics, but we should be able to do this guy real quick, because there's not a whole lot going on in there. So let me go ahead and get that off the tractor and we'll get it on the bench. Real quick, before I forgot to mention, on this side, the brake actuator was actually stuck partway open. One of the little pull links that connects one of the brake halves up into the clevis, the bottom one, it actually froze on the pin partway, and it had a very small range of movement, so it was stuck like a 1/16 of a turn open. It just started to walk the plates apart, and because of that, the springs that hold the brake actuator together, all three of them were stretched, and once I got it freed up and got it to collapse itself so I could get it apart, the springs just fell off because they were stretched so far. So this side definitely needed new springs. And it would also appear that because it was partway open, even though I never had any issues with this brake overheating, every once in a while I would have this brake stick and I'd have to put my foot under the pedal and pop it up, which that's part of the reason I tore into the brakes on this thing, was because it was doing that. And I had done everything I could with the linkage outside of the brake housing to eliminate any possibility that it was anything other than the brake actuator. So that would explain why it wouldn't collapse all the way and let the pedal come all the way up. And it also would appear that, like I say, even though I never had any issues with this brake overheating, I think this brake was actually dragging, because it wasn't collapsing all the way. And I think that might be why this side had that little rim of oil around it, is I wonder if it would make that seal hot sometimes and it would let the oil weep by. So I'd be curious to see after we run this thing if there's any evidence of oil in there after this. Regardless, I think this thing probably, knowing that, needs to be on the list for brake pinion seals. But it's not something I want to tear into at this moment, because I'm not saying you have to take the wheels off to do it, but to do it and to just be able to walk up to it really nice and just pull them out and put the new ones in, you're going to want to pull the wheels off, especially narrowed up on 30s like this thing is. And you have to make a special driver to drive the seals on, because you can do them without having to pull the pinion housings. You just run some screws into the seal into the seal casing, so you got something to yank it out of the bore with, but then you'll have to have a special driver to drive them back in square, and it's a not right now project, and they're not leaking. It's not like they're leaking like they're running out on the floor, so that can be done at either this summer or next winter, one of the two. Alright, it's been so long since I screwed with this, because I remember taking it apart. I think it was 2 summers ago now. I remember taking it apart and it was messed up, so I put it back together and got the parts ordered. And then I never even knew the parts showed up. Apparently the box must have showed up and Dad put it on the bench and I missed it. And then it got buried on the bench, and Dad was cleaning the bench off this summer. Oh, so now you want out. So Dad was cleaning the bench off this summer and found the box. And then I remembered, oh yeah, I ordered parts for that. So I was like, okay. Now I just got to remember exactly. I remember the small gear was shot, and I got the gasket, and I got the spring for that. But I don't remember what I had to do to get everything apart to replace what I needed to replace. I also need to get all of the, or the rest of the parts that I need to put the pre-cleaners on this thing. Like, because that guy sent me those pre-cleaners for it this summer. And I need to get the rest of the parts that I need to put those pre-cleaners together so I can put the pre-cleaners on it, but same thing. The box is sitting down on the bench in the barn, and I got going on other projects and kind of forgot about it, and I was moving stuff around the other day and found them, and it's like, oh yeah, I need to get those put on. I need to pull them back out of the box, and I know I needed screens for them. I think I needed a bolt or a stud that goes in them, or I needed to fix one of the studs or something. They needed some work done to them. But the top hats needed dollied back out. Okay, now I don't know if I can get away with not having to take the screw out and just cleaning the teeth up, because it was this gear that was screwed up. I don't remember seeing any bad teeth on the big gear. If I can just get the big gear cleaned up without having to take everything or take it out, that would be the ideal thing. But we got to drive the pin out of the handle. That one will do. Probably should have done this part when I was on the tractor, but I didn't think about it. Alright, so what do you mean you're not going to come through the hole? There we go. I don't get why it looks like somebody torched the top of this off. Unless I'd have to, same thing, I'd have to look in the parts book and see. Unless this one had the one-piece crank handle on it that had the handle bent into it, and they cut it off and put this on for some reason. I don't know why else there would be torch marks up here, and why it would look like there's a bend starting right here where they torched it off. Anyhow, now that that's out, we can work this guy around. Probably throw it in a vise so I can get a hold of it decent. Because if I don't have to try to pull that apart, because Lord knows how stuck it is. we're gonna have to take it out so I can clean up all the mess that's in there. Dadgummit. So I need a screwdriver to pop that E-clip out. And that'll let this drop out. And then there's a jam nut in here. That's the part I'm worried about. So we need the impact. Okay, let's pray. I'll be damned. The old balls in that thrust bearing have seen better days. Now we can knock that out. Alright, now that everything's apart and I got all the teeth cleaned up on here, they were all full of... I'm thinking somebody tried to pack this full of grease at some point, so I don't know how else. It was nasty, regardless. Got all that cleaned up, got the shaft cleaned up. Once everything's cleaned up, the sprocket's actually a slip fit on the shaft, go figure. And that can go back in there, except we're going to do this. Just to give it something. And then our thrust bearing. Ooh, that's good stuff. Have to look and see if these are still available new. If they are, I might look into getting a new one, but for now we'll shoot some Earl in there. Obviously you don't want this super duper tight. You don't want it sloppy. That don't feel too bad. I'm Gonna see if we got a tap to chase this one though, because this is the one I was hitting on with the hammer. Alright, this is all tightened back up. You can tell that thrust bearing has spent a lot of time running in one spot, because you can feel the indents from the balls. But it's at least free now. So we gotta tackle this. So we gotta get this pin drove out. Which was not nearly as stuck as I figured it'd be. Now, as far as the sprocket itself goes, that's probably going to be just as stuck as you think it'd be. So, that's going to have to go down in the press. Alright, everything's cleaned up, ready for the new sprocket. I got a new roll pin, but it's a little long, so let's drive it in flush and cut it off. This, then we know it's going to go in flush like that. Zip that off with a cutoff wheel so it can't catch on nothing. So I ended up having to put a longer spring pin in it. The one that came out of it was about that long, and I was like, okay, maybe that's part of the reason why it was all tore up in there, was because somebody put the wrong size spring pin in it. But then I was chasing these holes so I could put the cover back on, and it's like, so how's this thing lock? And I was looking in there, it's like, oh, that spring pin needs to be long because it engages those notches, and that's how it locks. So I had to put a longer spring pin in it. The more you know. First time I've ever had one of these apart, so that's what you get. Alright, so now we can put this on. I don't know why they felt the need to put a gasket on it, because it faces down, so water's not going to get into it. And honestly, water can get into it from the top, and you would think that it'd be better to have a way for the water to get out than it would to trap everything in there, but they put a gasket on there, so I'm going to put a gasket on there. Oh, and you're facing kind of goofy. And then there's this little spring deal. That's what holds the adjustment crank up in the locked position. And that just goes on this bolt here. I guess this is technically considered a machine screw, not a bolt. There's the hole. And it just goes about like so. And then after you adjust it, you take and you pull up on the, you rotate the crank till you find the notch, then you pull up on it and it'll slide up past the spring. And that's what holds it up in the locked position, so that the crank, or so that the adjustment screw can't walk on you while you're doing your field work. The gasket's a little bit of a booger. I didn't really want to line up with anything. Alright. So now that's back on, and it works. It's the first time it's worked since I've had the tractor. It's obviously got a couple of catches in it because of that thrust bearing. And I'm not, I don't think this is supposed to have this handle on it. I think this one's supposed to have the one-piece handle on it, because it catches. Now that I've actually got it where it works right, it catches. I don't think this is the right. I think somebody sawed this off and put the old style handle on it for some reason or another. So I will have to look for the right handle for it at some point. But this gets us going for now. It's not like you use it all the time. I just wanted this freed up so that if you had to level the 3-point to run the planter or something, say it walked or whatever, you didn't have to undo the 3-point to... Where are we at? Over here, we're at about 30. We're at about 30 and a half, so we need to go down. Going the right way? No. A little more. Close enough to government work. And then somewhere right there, that's the lock. And then with this handle, technically you're supposed to go like that, but like I don't think that's the right handle for this. But when you pull that up, that spring just kind of goes up underneath it ever so slightly, and that's how that's supposed to work. But anyhow, I think that about does it for today. And tomorrow we can tackle the hydraulics, which really, as long as I don't find anything out of the ordinary, the worst part's going to be pulling the fenders out of the way. The rest of it's pretty straightforward. I might go ahead and get the hydraulic oil drained out of it yet tonight. That way the reservoir's got time to drip down and it's not so much of a mess taking it apart tomorrow. But other than that, I think we'll tackle the hydraulics tomorrow, and I should be able to finish servicing it tomorrow. So, and then hopefully, weather permitting, they're saying the weather's supposed to be kind of goofy this week. It's supposed to start warm and then get cold again from what they were saying earlier. Let's have a look here. Monday 63, Tuesday 60, and a slight chance of rain. I mean, it gets a little, they were saying it was supposed to get cold, but now they're saying 42, 52, 57, 51. And then start getting chances of rain again starting the end of next week. So, but if we can get this out of here, get this done and out of here tomorrow, hopefully Monday after work we can get that load of lime spread out. It should just be one load. The field needs, well, we'll talk about that later. I think it's going to end up being one load. I think I got enough lime in the pile to do it, and it'll get rid of the pile and get it out of the way for the year. And then hopefully the rain Tuesday doesn't amount to much and we could jump on some chisel plowing. Fingers crossed. Otherwise I'm going to try to keep on plugging away at servicing tractors, because after this is done I got to get the 77's done, the 1800's done, the 1955's done. This will be done. So I still got to get my 66, the 1600, and the Super 55, and the 4150. So after this, I'll still have 4 more. But the 66 will be quick. The Super 55 will be quick. The 1600 servicing, it's going to be quick. It's just a matter of if I decide try to tackle the PTO on that before or after planting. because we still got to get the soil finisher still needs rebladed, and there's a few other things I'd like to do on it, time permitting. The planter probably needs to get transport tires put on it because they're getting kind of scary, and so that's just going to get some tires put on it and get bullseye seed tubes put on it, and then that should be good for the season because there wasn't anything wrong with it to begin with, unless there's a blade bad or something on it. So it'll just basically need a good once over. The drill needs switched back to beans, but it's pretty much ready to go. I mean, honestly, we're not sitting in too terrible a shape as far as getting things done for spring. Because April, I got a feeling, is probably not going to be very productive as far as field work, because I got a sneaking suspicion April's going to be wet, but we'll see. I hope, honestly, I hope April's wet. I'd rather not have a dry April. If we could have a wet April and then a kind of a dry, more normal May, June, that would be ideal. If we can have a wet April, not have a wet May, and then a dry June, like actually last year we had a wet April, and then May got dry, and then June got really dry. I don't know. It's so hard to look at the weather and try to, but I don't know. Anyway, that we're rambling and my head's just thinking about stuff now. So I'm going to get my tools cleaned up, and we're going to cut this one off here, and the hydraulics will be a second video. That way this doesn't get too got awful long, because I'm sure it's already long enough. So with that being said, that's it for this one. We'll catch you guys on the next one.